Well, I thought today I would address the fact that there are those who make certain statements and have accused me of different stuff. And instead of, shying away from it, or something like that, I'm going to just admit the truth. All right? Because it makes it that much easier. Now, what I'm going to admit is they falsely accused me. And for years, I dealt with them trying to force me to admit to stuff I didn't do. I finally got pissed off and I was like, you know what? I'm going to do some stuff that I'll admit to. And the crazy part is when you realize what I admit to, they don't seem to bother me about that at all. That's what's crazy. When I was in jail, there were some female guards that, they were, harassing me just like everybody else was for a moment, and they were, saying stuff about like, well, the reason blah 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 about stuff with girls, acting like I was going after young girls only, and I'm like, y'all are over 18, right? You have to be over 18 to work here, yeah. And y'all acting like either one, I don't even have a penis, or two, like it's really small, and that's you really want to make those claims. And they, you should have seen how they were acting. So finally, I showed them my dick. You play with it in front of them. And when the girls actually saw it, they it was a completely different reaction, which pissed off some of the dudes. And I'm like, well, you all were lying about me, and I decided to prove to girls what the reality was. And they weren't underage. So what are you mad at me for? And then they're like, well, he never admits to what he does anyways. And they're like, oh, now, did you actually show your dick to those? Yes, I did. I did show my dick to those girls. I even play with it in front of them. Yeah. So I admitted it. I'm going to talk about some of the stuff that they claimed I did that I never did. And they've been harassing me about it for years. They even destroyed my marriage because they couldn't let it go. They refused to look at the actual facts and evidence that proved I didn't do what I was accused of. Now, I ain't going to tell you all the different stuff. There's just a couple of different accusations that I actually know about definitively. And if you realize how many years I've been trying to find out what some of the accusations even were, because they wouldn't really tell me. I only knew little bits of what it was that they were accusing me of. And yet, for some reason, if you realize how many years ago some of those accusations were, it's like more than 20 years ago. And they still won't let it go. Because they're just really perverted. And they refuse to look at the evidence. And that's why I've done some of what I've done. And I admitted to what I actually did. And then when they're going, you won't accept responsibility for what you did. Actually, I did accept responsibility for what I did. You keep trying to force me to accept responsibility for stuff I didn't do. In fact, some of it is stuff that you yourself did. And when you realize they robbed my house, they just damaged my property, they falsely accused me and tried to put me in prison based on false allegations, false accusations. And so when you realize what they did and the reason why I did what I did, and now I'm going to talk about a couple of different cases that it should have been obvious what the reality was. See, at one point when I was younger, I was about 15 years old. I'm 41 years old now, all right? And there was a girl that was staying with my sister, all right? Now, I'm going to draw some pictures and hopefully it'll help you kind of sort of figure it out. So let's say that that's my family's house, all right? And then there's the backyard area. And then there was a shed that I converted into a bedroom for myself. Now the bedroom was actually outside of the house, all right? It was a completely separate building, all right? So when you realize that that's where I was. My bed was there. There was a door there, you know. And so I was in my room, and I got called into the house. Now, there's a room that has a sliding door, and it had a lock kind of deal that had a piece of wood that was there that held the door shut. All right? So I got called into the house because a bed that was right there had my sister sleeping there and her friend sleeping there. So they were sleeping in the same bed right next to each other. All right? I get called into the house because apparently my sister's friend, who was against the wall on the bed. Now, if you realize the bed was over on one side of the room and there was a wall right there. So there was a bed and a wall, and then there was barely any space at the base of the bed between the end of the bed and the wall there. All right? Now, they claimed that I touched her while she was asleep. That's what they were claiming. They said that my sister's friend, who was in bed with my sister, felt me touching her, and yet I was in my room, and they called me into the house. Now, what's odd about it is, just like I said, when you start thinking about it, right? First of all, I was in my room. Secondly, I'm going, well, if she felt it, that means she was awake, right? Why didn't she, like, yell or something if that's what happened? Why didn't she, why, like I said, if you start asking certain questions, logical questions, then it's like, well, secondly, my sister was on the side of the bed that was towards the outer part of the room, right? Because I asked about that. I was like, where were the girls sleeping and all that? I asked questions. That's how I know some of it, because I asked questions. So, realizing that the girl that accused me was actually against the wall on the other side of my sister, and my sister was actually on the side of the bed that was towards the open part of the room. And my room wasn't even a part of the house. It was outside the house in a completely separate building. And they called me over the intercom that I had in my room and asked me to go to the house. So when they called me, I was actually in my room. And then, like I said, if you realize that the bed was against the wall, now they were like, well, there was a little bit of space there. You know what? I would actually like to set up a room with the exact same kind of deal and see how many different ones could actually reach the bed from that spot. Because believe it or not, after they made some of those accusations, I actually tried crawling under the bed to see if I could even reach it over the side, and I couldn't. There wasn't enough room. I could barely put my arm up like that. It's like, it just, it was impossible. And so it was like, okay, so couldn't have put my arm to the side there. It's like, were they under the blankets? Oh, they were under the blankets. Okay. So they had the covers and blankets over them. So I would have had to have gotten under the blankets and then somehow gotten under her clothes, which I don't even know for sure what she was wearing. But it's like, okay, so you're telling me somehow, magically, from my room, I managed to get under the covers, under her clothes, without my sister ever having waking up, and only she was awake, apparently, right? Because like I said, I asked questions. So she was awake, my sister was asleep, my sister somehow magically slept through me somehow getting under the covers and touching a girl that was against the wall. And, of course, the girl was awake, though, right? She was awake. So then, that's how she knew that someone was touching her while I was in my room. And they had to call me from my room to go to the house to deal with an accusation. So if we went to court and I actually started asking some of the questions that I asked, what do you think would happen if you were the jury and you realized some of the facts for what they actually were, and then realized that there are those for some reason who refuse to accept reality, and they're like, well, somehow he got away with it. Somehow he did. We don't know how he did it. And so because of that accusation, that's part of the reason why they destroyed my marriage and have tried to ruin other relationships, because they just can't let it go and they can't look at the actual facts. That's just one accusation that I can prove what the reality is. Now I'm going to talk about just one more accusation, all right? Because, like I said, when you start realizing certain patterns, you have a pattern of behavior. That's what they told me. Really? Is it me that has a pattern of behavior? Maybe you need to look at the actual pattern. What's the actual pattern of behavior? Now, another accusation that I don't know all the details of, but I did ask some questions, once again, And what's funny, too, is when you realize someone like, oh, you're defensive. You're defending yourself. That proves you're guilty. No, it doesn't. That's why they have court. So that you can defend yourself if you're being accused. Because if it's a false accusation, you defend yourself to prove you're innocent. You're acting like, oh, you're defending yourself, therefore you're guilty. Which is the most outlandishly stupid accusation I've ever heard, that they'd say that I was guilty because I defended myself. But that's what they actually did. Now, you got to realize, there was a dude and his wife, all right? So, a married couple, all right? That the wife went to a party. I got a phone call. I was at my parents' house. I was temporarily staying with them. And it was something where while I was, like I own my own house now, all right? So when you realize I was temporarily staying with my parents, and I got a phone call from, the girl telling me, hey, I'm at a party, blah, 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 blah. And she said she was making out with dudes and stuff, and she wanted to go home. I'm like, all right, whatever. Well, since I was there at my parents' house, I was like, hey, Mom, you want to go with to go pick her up? Because I don't want there to be any, question of what's actually happening, right? I'm just going to get her to bring her home. Now, what was odd about it was my mom was in the car and heard Shelly, was her name, all right, heard her actually talking about making out with dudes at the party. And that she was glad that I was nice enough to get her and bring her home to her place. And I was like, why didn't you just call your husband? And she said that he was out of town working. Now, you got to realize, I, really just kind of I was like, you might want to tell him, And that was it. I just left it at that. All right? Now, they invited me to their house for some drinks, to have some alcohol. So, I'm at their place, right? And if I remember right, I think there was a door there, and like the kitchen area, and then there was a chair, and then a couch that was against the wall, and somewhere over there was the bedroom. All right? So, realizing that if that's the bedroom, and that's the living room, and that's a chair, and that's the couch, that after I'd had a bit to drink, basically, it was something where they're like, you know what, maybe you shouldn't, drive home because, you don't want to get a ticket and stuff. I was like, oh, that's nice. So I actually slept in the chair. I was like, I was like tired, and I went and sat in the chair and I fell asleep. Now, I didn't know until later. There's stuff that, like I said, I asked questions. Keith, who was the husband, apparently went to the bedroom, right? So Keith went to the bedroom, and Shelley, who was the wife, for some reason decided she was going to sleep on the couch. And I often wondered, why didn't she go to the bedroom with her husband? Why is it if I was sleeping on the chair in the living room that she decided to sleep on the couch? Why didn't she go to the bedroom with her husband? Now, I don't know exactly what it is she accused me of, other than, some kind of touching, again, which I'm just like, really? Like I said, there's a pattern that seems to have developed. You know what I mean? Where she was accusing me of touching her. And I was asleep. Now, what's interesting is, from what I was told, Keith left the bedroom to walk over to where I was at, and I was asleep. I was asleep sitting there in the chair after she apparently went to the bedroom. So she goes to the bedroom. For some reason, Keith leaves the bedroom, and I'm sleeping there in the chair. And he didn't wake me up. Apparently, he saw I was asleep and went back to the bedroom with Shelley. And yet, when you realize that there are those who, for some reason, can't let it go. They actually are listening to a girl who was going out and partying and making out with dudes and all that kind of stuff, who apparently didn't even go directly to the bedroom with her husband, but for some reason decided she wanted to sleep on the couch. And I was sleeping, sitting in the chair. So if we went to court, and then realizing that, after that incident, there were those that noticed she was flirting with tons of dudes constantly. And then she cheated on her husband. It was something where, after accusing me, she actually went and cheated on her husband, where, who knows if she'd done it before. I can't say definitively, other than the kissing and stuff, which apparently a bunch of different ones consider that cheating, right? That she was making out with other dudes and they consider that cheating because they tried to accuse me of doing what it was that the girls actually were doing in their lives. So they tried to make it sound like I cheated on my ex-wife and got my ex-wife to cheat on me, and then they act like I'm some sort of terrible person and all that. And like I said, when you start realizing the realities, right? So what do you think would happen if we went to court? If we actually started talking about some of the realities? And like I said, I don't know what all it is that I'm accused of with some of it. I'm just telling you what it is that I actually know as factual. Of what it is that I, asked questions about and tried to get as much truth as I possibly could about what it was I was being accused of. And those were the facts. That's what I can tell you. What I can tell you is what it is that I'm showing you. And if there was something else to tell that I actually knew about, I'd tell you. But I'm just telling you the actual facts. So if we went to court, and if you realize this is the kind of accusations I'm dealing with, What do you think would happen if we actually went to court to talk about some of the cases that they act as if I've done something wrong? And then, like I said, I'm at home, all right? I actually had to deal with false accusations that actually I was in jail, all right? And then I went to court for 2 days after they kept trying to stall. They kept trying to stop, the court case. They even tried to put me in a mental institution and tried to skip the court process altogether. And then I got to go to court and in front of a jury present one case. And it was a different case. All right? Where some officers had falsely accused me. It's part of the reason why I did what I did with some of those female officers. But an officer had falsely accused me of assaulting him. And the evidence proved that I hadn't. And they were trying to make it sound like I wouldn't admit to stuff that I did. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do some different stuff and I'm going to admit to it. I'll admit to what I actually did because they don't believe me when I tell them the truth. And what's crazy is when you realize that the female officers, they're like, we let them do it. Yeah, they did. They let me do it. So at least they were honest about it. It's just kind of crazy though, like I said, when you realize I was honest from the beginning. And it was because of false accusations. Because they wouldn't look at the actual facts. Because for some reason, in their self-righteous, hypocritical, whatever you want to call it, they refused to look at the actual evidence for what it was. And I have been dealing with their idiocy for years. And because they refused to accept the truth, it ruined my marriage, it's ruined friendships. There were those who felt justified in, attacking me personally. And it wasn't just words. They even literally tried to kill me. That they robbed me, stole items from my house, they stole money from me because of false accusations. When you realize they damaged my property, they even killed my dog because of false accusations. And for some reason, they feel justified with their little self-righteous bullshit. But what happens if we actually look at the actual facts? What if we actually went to court? What if we actually presented an actual case? What would happen then? I ain't scared. And I ain't running. I was trying to be nice. And they went too far. And I just needed to prove what the reality was. So some of what I've done in more recent years was because no one would listen to the truth. And so I was like, how can I possibly prove to everyone else what the reality is? So like I said, if we went to court, what do you think would happen?